So the Thunderbolts released a couple months back, and man, I thought that movie was absolutely terrible and I couldn't wait to escape the theater. However, I noticed that a hefty amount of people out there actually enjoyed this movie quite a bit. So rather than just poo-poo hate on this movie like I usually do, I thought it would be more productive to try and understand where this glimmer of hope is coming from, to see if there's anything that can be learned from it. But first, let's start with the lowlights to explain why this movie completely failed at the box office. Then we'll circle back around to the good stuff. For starters, the entire premise is a lie. The Thunderbolts are a team of villains, and are essentially Marvel's answer to the Suicide Squad. This movie has nothing to do with the Thunderbolts, despite what some very recently made comics might gaslight you into thinking. Their main storyline involves them being forcibly recruited by Team Iron Man during the Civil War conflict, as a means of boosting his side's numbers, with the arrangement being that these villains can reduce their prison sentences as long as they do what S.H.I.E.L.D. tells them to. With this being a controversial move that blurs the morality of this conflict, and ironically sees the villains putting the heroes behind bars. That concept sounds like it would make for a pretty awesome movie, but that has nothing to do with the movie that they made. The more notable members of the real team include Baron Zemo, Lady Deathstrike, Mac Gargan's Venom, and Taskmaster amongst others. Of the movie lineup, Taskmaster and Ghost are the only ones with any comic precedence, but Ghost was always an obscure character across both mediums, and Taskmaster gets killed off in the first act, though it's hard to care too much about that, because this character doesn't resemble comic Taskmaster in any tangible way. In fact, Ghost doesn't resemble his comic self either. But this is still an insane thing to do. Altered or not, Taskmaster is a pretty big deal in the comics, and is an extremely reoccurring villain across dozens of different books. To just completely change his character and then kill him/her off in 2 movies is ludicrous. Why is the MCU so incapable of featuring good villains? Ghost should have been a villain, but like Taskmaster, they made him a her, and made her a misunderstood victim rather than a proper antagonist. As for the rest of the roster within the context of the MCU, they're just a random hodgepodge of background characters that aren't particularly noteworthy, or are all that villainous. Marvel has access to a huge catalog of all-time great superheroes. Why are we wasting time on US Agent and Red Guardian? We have Great Value Captain America and Wish Captain America teaming up alongside Tumblr Captain America, in a world where Temu Captain America is also flying around somewhere, and is hanging out with DEI Captain America. And that's not even touching the multiverse yet. Like, are we so burnt out that we have no other ideas outside of copy and paste? Make a Heroes for Hire movie. Make a Ghost Rider movie. Make a comic-accurate Thunderbolts movie. Make something that people actually want to see. It was foolish to think they could headline a film with Yelena Belova and think it would have any kind of success. We could have been watching Hulk vs. Wolverine, but they put this out instead. It doesn't help that all the dialogue came straight out of Clown World, with every character speaking with the same sarcastic slapstick tone from start to finish. Marvel has had an overabundant comedy problem for a long time, and this movie is one of the worst offenders. It is difficult to find any amount of investment in this story when every single moment of sincerity gets undercut by a stupid sarcastic joke. This style of writing makes it feel like the filmmakers themselves don't care and aren't taking this seriously. And if they don't care, then why should I? All this story serves to do is further diminish the relevance and stakes that Marvel movies have. Being a super soldier used to be an intentionally rare and special thing. That's why they killed off the scientist after he only made 1 sample. But now these guys are so abundant that being one really doesn't mean anything anymore. It's easy to become a super soldier, and therefore the benefits of being a super soldier are cancelled out since they hardly have any practical edge in any given conflict.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
Not to mention, the normal, non-superpowered characters, like the new Black Widow, have been gassed up so extremely that they might as well be super soldiers, because there's no noticeable difference between those who are and those who aren't. When even the normal humans have such an easy time fighting enemies that they get bored and show up to work in their PJs, then the world isn't really that dangerous, is it? It's not all that impressive when they save the day, when it feels like any old schmuck off the street could do just as good of a job, if not better. Seeing Sarah Connor escape the mental hospital in Terminator 2 was much more thrilling than anything the Thunderbolts had to offer, because despite being a relatively normal woman, Sarah Connor was able to take down a wide range of much larger guards by being smart and distracting them before going in for any attacks. The way this scene was choreographed made it seem like she spent a lot of time planning out this escape. but even the slightest slip-up could get her captured again. Because of that, this escape sequence helped contribute towards making Terminator 2 one of the greatest films of all time. Comparing that to Yelena Belova yawning her way through clouds of easy, lifeless enemies that provide no resistance feels like a night and day difference. Scenes like this are so cheap and boring that they make me wonder why I'm even bothering to watch this movie in the first place. It's not clever, it's not exciting, it's just nothing. Along these same lines, the remaining Thunderbolts roster is so irrelevant in this movie that they could get cut out entirely and not much would change, outside of the frequency of jokes. The plot did not necessitate a team-up, nor did this antagonist. Putting them up against Sentry means that they are all basically useless, and the only way to defeat him is to talk him out of it. Sentry should be that powerful, but ideally, for a movie like this, you would want an antagonist that would allow the Thunderbolts as a whole to matter more. Actually, they're not the Thunderbolts, they're the New Avengers. Yeah, that's still not good. The comic New Avengers consisted of Wolverine, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Ronin, Iron Fist, Spider-Woman, and Luke Cage, who was the leader of the team. After Team Captain America lost the Civil War conflict, these remnants formed as a covert team to continue fighting crime while evading superhero registration. Now that sounds like the groundwork for an awesome movie that loads of people would love to see. But sadly, this comic has nothing at all to do with what they actually made. And if we play the diversity game, they robbed us of a beloved original black hero in a leading role, for no reason. Where is Luke Cage, by the way? Why has he appeared in nothing outside of his shitty Netflix show? This is a huge character that a lot of people love. Bringing him out should be an easy, non-controversial layup. But the people behind the scenes are apparently too stupid or malicious to see that. They would rather fill this movie with 3 white dudes who all have the same powers. I should note that I'm no fan of seriously playing the diversity game. I think it's good when the race and gender of each character matches what was in the comics. But at the same time, bloating the story with copycat characters is also very boring. I mainly just wanted to point out that the MCU higher-ups set these expectations for themselves and are still failing to meet them. Alright, so we got the bad parts out of our systems. Let's focus on the good, part of which I think is because of the Winter Soldier's return. We haven't gotten to see him do anything cool in a while, so it's nice to have him back. Though the main focus of this movie's praise has to go to Sentry. The special effects for Void in particular were great, and were a breath of fresh air compared to the now standard Marvel cheapness. And ultimately his character did have a real message about mental health that seemed to speak to people on a somewhat deeper level. His story covers the idea of being trapped in a non-stop cycle of depression, where Sentry stays locked in his worst memories, and the inability to escape brings him to self-harm, only making the anguish worse, with him only able to break the cycle by surrounding himself with the genuine care of others. These topics are presented in a more sincere and metaphorical fashion that goes noticeably deeper than other aspects of this movie. If the movie had a stronger focus on this character, concept, and theme, then it would be much better all around. By wasting so much time on these nonsensical jokes and irrelevant characters, we miss out on a much stronger setup to this mental health focused finale. Instead, the movie spends very little time on Sentry, aka Bob, with the majority of his early scenes being focused on jokes, with less time being focused on his relationships with others. Honestly, if you cut all the fluff out, this movie really could have thrived as a Sentry solo film. They do the bare minimum to tell us that he is depressed, then do just enough to establish a friendship with him and some of the Thunderbolts. Then he turns on them at the flip of a switch, mostly because the plot demands it, before they quickly reconcile in the finale. With how little time he spends with the Thunderbolts beforehand, their big power of friendship victory feels rather shallow, because even though the concept is nice, we know they aren't really that great of friends, since they barely know each other and have barely spent time together. Regardless, they had the right idea, and these themes are pretty on brand with who Sentry is in the comics, which is always nice to see. But if you want a deeper, more nuanced take on these similar ideas, then you should definitely just try out the books instead. Which shouldn't be the case since the movie has a much higher production value, and the benefit of hindsight, meaning the writers should have an easy time understanding what would work and fail in these storylines, if only they would follow how well the comics were received at the time. But it is what it is. Now, even though this movie was technically a failure, hopefully Marvel can at least learn from the critical successes that lie within it, and can rebuild the brand back to its prime shape. Until then, let's all collectively keep our standards at the high levels these movies should be at, and if this video met your standards, be sure to like and subscribe.